It was on this day in 1988 because it's Michael Jackson, so of course it was the 80s. The Way You Make Me Feel went to number one on the U.S. singles chart this 23rd of January, 1988. It was the third single from Michael Jackson's album Bad, which was his seventh studio album. But here's the thing. Michael Jackson wrote more than 60 songs, 60 for that album, had plans to release it as a 3-disc album, but producer Quincy Jones said, you know what? You know what you need to do? You need to cut that 60 down and make one single disc for your Bad album. And so it was, and The Way You Make Me Feel went number one on this day 37 years ago, back in 1988. Good Thursday morning, 6 minutes past 9 on this 23rd of January, 2025. I joked this morning, I mean, it's not a great joke, that it's warmer. It felt warmer out there. But it tells you something when you're saying that -7 or 8 is warmer. That just goes to show you how cold it has been. And a good buddy of mine responded, I put that little bit at the beginning of my daily show preview. You know, if you don't, not the Jon Stewart Daily Show, the preview that I do daily for this show. You see, there's a lot of shows out there. I share it with you on various social media platforms. On my X at Farwell_WR. Same on Instagram at Farwell_WR. And then, of course, on our Facebook page, Facebook.com/The Mike Farwell Show. If you are not following any of those platforms, I invite you to do so. Keep you up to date on things and a little bit of opportunity for interaction during and outside of show hours. So when I shared that on Instagram this morning, good buddy of mine who is a fellow motorcycle enthusiast said, it still ain't warm enough for riding, Farwell. Jimmy, you are so right, my friend. You are so right. And wouldn't you know, it looks like it's starting to break now, thank goodness. But the quote-unquote warmer it gets, the more likely it is to snow. Is that how it works? Anyway, I walked out of my studio getting my prep done down the hall, and all I could see out the windows from the newsroom is the snow falling. I'm ready. Okay, winter, we get it. You win. I surrender. If I waved a white towel right now, would you get the HE double hockey sticks out of here? Would you do that for me? Last night, we were coming home from a lovely dinner with friends, and I had to stop to get gas. And the strangest sight was at this particular gas station, which also included a car wash. And the sight was the lineup, and I do mean lineup, for vehicles to go through said car wash. It's after 8 o'clock. It's approximately -20 degrees, and you're going through the car wash. Now, I understand, and I've come to learn that many are almost obsessive about the number of times they get their vehicle washed. But you do you. I just don't get it. At 8:30 at night, when it's -20 outside, you're going to wash your car. You ain't going to get no sun to dry it off or maybe prevent things from freezing this morning. I wonder how many had stuck doors when they tried to open their vehicle this morning. Anyway, you got a clean car. Nobody could see it because it was dark, but it was clean.
It's the final countdown.
All right, let's get to that Farwell Show 5 for this Thursday morning. Number one, another local politician has tossed his hat into the provincial ring. Regional councillor Rob Deutschmann announced as the Liberal candidate in Cambridge. This follows regional councillor Colleen James as the Liberal candidate in Kitchener Centre. Hey, is anyone left on regional council doing regional council stuff? Just, hello? Anybody doing regional council? Okay, anyway. Public School Board trustee Carla Johnson is the Green Party candidate in Cambridge. And with more than one election to come this year, I don't think we're yet done with seeing local councillors seeking higher office. Deutschmann, by the way, joins this show this morning at 10. Number two, a new school to be built in Cambridge will welcome students from both the local public and Catholic boards under the same roof. Groundbreaking for the elementary school on Wesley Boulevard in Cambridge is set for the spring. The school will have 45 classrooms and space for almost 900 students. Number three on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, the federal government has signed deals with 9 municipalities across Ontario including Waterloo Region, to address the ongoing homelessness crisis. The agreements are worth a combined $91 million over 2 years and are meant to support the municipality's encampment response plans. Number 4, the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences has announced its Oscar nominees. The nominees for Best Picture are Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Emilia Perez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked. The announcement was delayed twice due to the devastating wildfires in LA. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning. You don't get to win them all, and the Leafs most certainly did not win last night, falling 5-1 to Columbus. But it's a good thing Austin Matthews scores almost every night, so we can play a little AM on AM in the AM.
Marner got it back to him again on the boards near side for Nylander. Big 3 out there again. Nylander in the corner. Nylander centers and they score! Matthews scores right on the doorstep.
Matthews had the only goal for the Leafs last night, scoring for the 5th straight game. He now sits on 20 goals for the season. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Thursday morning. A quick break. When we come back, we talked yesterday on the show about the concerns expressed by downtown businesses in Kitchener about safety and how they are almost on the front lines when it comes to dealing with the homelessness crisis. Is there anything the city can do about it? Is there hope on the horizon? We'll talk to a downtown Kitchener councillor right after this on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio. We talked yesterday on the show about a meeting that was hosted by the Downtown Kitchener BIA earlier this week. The meeting was designed to allow downtown businesses to share their concerns around safety. That was kind of the general theme, and when you get into the detail, you find that safety really means the challenges posed by our homeless population and their impact on downtown businesses. Stephanie Stretch is the Ward 10 councillor in the city of Kitchener, which includes the north side, let's say, of King Street. I think that's what it is. I don't know my east, west, north, and south in this town, but it's the side of King Street that has City Hall. That is part of Stephanie Stretch's ward, and she joins the show this morning. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning, Mike.
What are you hearing from businesses in the downtown core, if anything, about challenges they face or concerns they have around safety?
Yeah, I think, at the meeting earlier this week, it was difficult to hear about some of the challenges the businesses were experiencing. But really what I walked away from was just like a real sense of coming together and realizing that this is something that like individual businesses couldn't do on their own. So coming together, hearing about their challenges, and then trying to figure out next steps to how to deal with this together as a community. So I'm sure, as you know, downtown Kitchener, we're just seeing more and more people. So we have about 5,000 more residents downtown than we used to in the last years, and we have about another 2,500 residents set to move in within the next year or so. So we're seeing all of the challenges in a just a really localized and concentrated way in the downtown core. And yeah, I think that's not a surprise to anyone. There was nothing completely shocking other than a willingness and an openness to try to do better.
So how can we do that, Steph? How can we do better for these businesses and for our downtown?
Well, like I said before, what was really encouraging to me was this willingness to come together. And although many of the problems that the downtown core faces, it's not unique to Kitchener. We're seeing this in many cities across Canada. I think what's unique to Kitchener is this willingness to really come together and work. So we had all levels of government at the meeting. I think it's going to take some significant investment, and that's going to mean, not just a city investment, but investment from, kind of every direction we can get it to help in the downtown core. So we're definitely committed as a city to keep working with the BIA to figure out what its members would like to see, whether that's some sort of training for staff in de-escalation. It's important that following up from that meeting that we work with a sense of urgency to lay out a series of plans. So short term, medium term, and long term. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of post this meeting. There are some problems, but there definitely are some solutions, especially working together, not having it sit just at one table. But I'm really excited to kind of get to work on this.
I know that along with municipal representatives such as yourself, we had MPPs, MPs, regional police, et cetera, kind of at the table, that coming together that you've made reference to. Following the meeting, were there next steps planned? Do we know where we're going to go from here? Or did we just have a big bitch session? Pardon the expression.
Well, the call was to have some next steps out of the meeting. So part one was identifying the problem. And so that was really what the meeting was about. And then the asks from the meeting were, a response. So I think for us as a city, we're really organizing our Chief Executive Officer, Dan Chapman. He's working with our city staff, with our Executive Director of Economic Development to form an internal working group. And so that working group is going to help us, really start to tackle and take the lead on some of these issues downtown. And then we are grateful for the commitment from the police and the region. They're definitely key partners. And it's going to be important for us to work together on solutions for supporting these businesses.
Steph, I appreciate your time on the show this morning. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Anytime at all. Enjoy your day.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stephanie Stretch is the Ward 10 councillor in the city of Kitchener. Her ward encompasses the north side of King Street, downtown, if you will, the side that has the museum, the side that has the city hall, etc. Debbie Chapman's the Ward 9 councillor, whose ward is on the other side of King. But there you get a sense of optimism, I would say, that folks have come together and collaborated on ideas to solving what is a problem identified by downtown businesses. Next thing will be the action that comes with it. Your thoughts? Always welcome on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio. Just ahead of our 9:30. I'm not moving time that quickly. 9:30 update in the 570 News Center. Let's get to the phones here from you, Steve. Good morning.
Good morning. So I got to say, man, I've been listening to your show since early this morning, and I can tell you, just based on some of the comments made by these councillors, regional and city here, I got to say it's extremely frustrating. Like even started out with Deutschman and his comments about 8 years of provincial leadership, and that he's going to hold them to account for the homelessness in this region, to say nothing of the 10 years of liberal ideals and stuff that have put us in this mess. And, especially at the regional council, at his level, they've done absolutely nothing. And then listening to Mrs. Stretch here talk, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, this city, with this leadership, there's no leadership. I guess we could just say it like that. Right? And listening to her just kind of mothball and word salad her way through your interview when you asked her what kind of things we can do, and just coming together and working together, like those aren't solutions, right? And like you asked her some easy questions and she couldn't answer them. She danced around them with, it was like listening to a 10-year-old girl talk. Super annoying. Really, like it's just, I don't know. The politics in this region are just terrible, to say the least. And I have advice for people. If you're a downtown business owner and you're in a lease, try and get out of it, move your business, because things downtown, they're not going to get better.
Well, and that's the frustration for business owners, I know, and I got to get to the news update. Look, I will say this. I feel for cities in this because there is no mechanism to deal with a problem of this magnitude at the municipal level. I said it yesterday on the show. I'll say it again. There needs to be, like, we keep calling these things crises, right? There's a homelessness crisis. There's an addiction crisis. There's a housing crisis. If there's a crisis, you have to treat it as such. You must meet it with urgency. I ain't seeing no urgency. And it's not just on the part of the city. But I understand your frustration for sure, because it's tough out there. Let's keep our chin up and push forward. An update from the 570 News Center, and then gambling in Ontario. It's been a windfall revenue-wise, but has it created another problem? We'll talk about it coming up. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. The provincial government has bet big on online gambling, but at what cost? That's a question posed in some new research from a number of academics, and one of those academics, Iris Bolotis, joins our program this morning. Iris is an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster University. And Iris, let's start with the big bet that the government made itself and the revenues generated from it. Because I recall when the province of Ontario was talking about the legalization of online gambling, sports betting, etc., one of the arguments in favor was people are making these wagers anyway. We may as well repatriate some of that revenue, tax it, etc. So do we know now how much revenue has been generated by the province and how that may also have changed our gambling habits?
That's a good question. The revenue generated by iGo is really staggering, around $72 billion in the past year, so in 2024. Some of these funds are delivered back to the government, so the government is generating tax revenue in this industry, and they're profiting. They're profiting heavily from it. As a gambling researcher myself, I would love to have a good idea about how our gambling habits are changing. Unfortunately, part of the impetus for this piece that we wrote is that there's no independent research base monitoring the current situation going on in the province. And depending on the jurisdiction and the type of gambling, other research has shown that approximately 15 to 50% of gambling revenue comes from those with problem gambling. So the industry and others are essentially profiting from those who are most vulnerable.
So how might we define a problem gambler, and are we seeing more of them in Ontario?
That's a really good question. We know that gambling is a public health issue. It's addictive the same way that alcohol and tobacco are highly addictive. So we should, in fact, be monitoring the situation continuously to understand the impact of this new industry of iGo. And you can think of problem gambling on a continuum. So experiencing a few harms related to, for example, not spending more than you mean to, not being able to cut back on gambling. But this goes on a continuum to full-blown gambling disorder, where people are completely consumed by gambling, giving up all sorts of daily activities, engaging sometimes in criminal activities as well, and similar to other substance-based addictions, showing tolerance and sensitization effects, all of these things. So problem gambling is always a concern. And as I mentioned, at this point, we don't have any independent oversight or arm's length work going into what is essentially in the public interest, understanding if problem gambling is becoming a major issue in Ontario. As part of the OGRES, or the Ontario Gambling Research Society, myself and some of my colleagues have made this case to both IGO and to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. We approached both these institutions on multiple occasions, including prior to the launch of IGO, and stressed the need for impartial research. We need it to be independently funded, and we need to build an evidence base of gambling changes in Ontario. And some of my colleagues and I are just in the process now of publishing a paper from a survey that we did just prior to the launch of IGO. So in 2022, we showed rates of problem gambling around 9%. So this is even before the launch of IGO. And now there's some little bits of data trickling in hinting that these rates are climbing. So around 11% now noted in the province last year. And so these numbers are hinting that problem gambling rates are on the rise, very likely. All of this should be of extreme concern to Ontarians, and in fact, to all of Canada, because other provinces are looking to Ontario to see and to understand what the impact of this new industry is. And the truth is, we have no independent oversight of what is going on. So moving forwards, we essentially have little credible data to inform policy and to inform healthcare providers as well.
You know, when you talk about the need for this third-party oversight, arm's length, independent, et cetera, it makes me feel a little bit as though, Iris, like we have the kind of the fox in charge of the hen house here. Are we making any movement on this, or who or what, if anything, is providing oversight now?
So AGCO, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, is charged with oversight. But as I mentioned, they are a huge subsidiary of the profits and revenue generated from this industry. And they can in no way be seen as independent. So for them to be leading investigations and reports and research into gambling in Ontario is it's not independent. It's difficult to believe an institution that is profiting from the very industry it's meant to oversee.
You said something earlier that I think is worth emphasizing a little bit further when you described problem gambling as a public health issue. And I confess to having come to this understanding much later in my life, because when you think about somebody who may be a problem gambler, you would think about the financial losses that they suffer, right? Yeah. So this takes a financial toll. But when we look at it through the lens of a public health issue, I think we recognize that the losses or the impacts are far greater than just financial.
I completely agree. I think financial losses are sort of the obvious things to look at, but they're really the tip of the iceberg. And I think in particular, as opposed to other addictions, gambling harms are often unique, and they're not easily traced back to gambling as the initial source of problems. So I think things like intergenerational, or we talk about legacy harms and the poverty cycle, these are actually similar to what's seen in substance use disorders. And we see this perpetuation of poverty and welfare reliance across generations. We talked about also problem gambling being on a continuum, but we also know that problem gambling has a strong relationship with other psychiatric conditions, so substance-based disorders, but also depression and anxiety disorders, and extremely high rates of suicide ideation. We also know that the harms associated with problem gambling are not evenly distributed. Specific demographics and subgroups are at increased risk of experiencing addiction and gambling-related harm. So think about adolescents, older adults, Indigenous peoples, and individuals with low socioeconomic status. We also know that people often with problem gambling, when their legal sources of money disappear, they end up engaging in criminal behavior. So things like theft, embezzlement, fraud. And the extent of these crimes are actually not clear because many of the crimes remain undetected or underreported. For example, it's not uncommon for someone with gambling disorder perhaps to steal from a family member or loved one. And this loved one may be very reluctant to press charges against their spouse, for example, or their brother. But we do know that there is data showing about 30 to 50% of people with problem gambling admit to gambling-related crimes. And if they're asked in an anonymous setting or often in treatment-seeking settings, we have around 75% of individuals reporting gambling-related crimes. And finally, the probably the most disturbing harm associated with gambling that I think is the most misunderstood or not brought to light is that most people don't know the high rates of suicide associated with gambling disorder. Approximately 50% of individuals with gambling disorder report suicidal ideation. Depending on the study, 17 to 35% have made suicide attempts. These rates are double what we see in many substance use disorders. And there was a very striking study published last year that found that as problem gambling severity increases, so did the risk of suicide attempts. And this was actually irrespective of an individual's previous experience with gambling, with problem gambling. So I think these harms are extremely striking and really underreported and underrepresented because there is still so much stigma associated with problem gambling.
It is such an important conversation, and I'm so glad you could be a part of it on the show today. Iris, thank you very much for being with us.
Okay, thank you so much.
Iris Belotis is an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster University. Joins us to talk about the explosion, really, of gambling, online gambling in the province of Ontario and the subsequent problems that have been created. And look, it's not like we didn't know this would be or could be a thing. Virtually every gambling advertisement you hear or see has the disclaimer. If you have a gambling problem, you should call this number or visit this website or seek support from this service, right? So we know that problem gamblers exist, and the research is telling us that more problem gamblers have been created. And the losses, of course, go well beyond just financial. This is a legitimate public health concern. Question becomes, as always, what do we do about it? Iris and her colleagues are looking for some sort of third-party arm's length agency or organization that provides oversight on all of this, which makes some sense to me. But I wonder if there aren't other things that we should be considering as well, including a limit, if not the outright elimination of the advertising for gambling. I mean, you can't watch a sporting event now without seeing some superstar athlete telling you which gaming site to use, or some Hollywood celebrity telling you which gambling platform to use. I don't know. I know that we can make choices on our own, but I think we're casting the net so wide, we are gathering in more people that are prone to making poorer choices. What do you think of the online gambling industry in Ontario today? 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio.
Other provinces are looking to Ontario to see and to understand what the impact of this new industry is. And the truth is, we have no independent oversight of what is going on. So moving forward, we essentially have little credible data to inform policy and to inform healthcare providers as well.
So let's get some independent oversight, right? Iris Balotis is an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences at McMaster University. She and her colleagues advocate for that independent oversight and talk about how the incredible revenue generated through gambling, online gambling in this province has also led to an increase in problem gambling. And I don't think this comes as a surprise to anyone. And I wonder if there aren't things we could or should be doing to limit the number of problem gamblers that result from this. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. I have shared with you before that I am no stranger to laying the occasional wager ever since I was a kid, really. And I'll never forget the Super Bowl, whereby it was the 81? Anyway, Eagles Raiders. I was convinced the Eagles were going to win. I bet all my friends at school, $2 each. That's a lot of money for a 10, 11-year-old kid. The Eagles did not win. The game was out of hand by halftime. And my parents noticed the change in demeanor of their young boy who was no longer enjoying watching the Super Bowl. And I had to fess up that I had bet $8, $2 to 4 different people, and I didn't have the money to pay those bets the next day. So my dad gave me the money, which I had to, of course, work to pay back. And he said, don't you ever again bet money that you do not have to lose. And believe it or not, as a 10, 11-year-old kid, that lesson never left me. And as much as I have enjoyed wagering over my lifetime, I hardly, the funny thing is, now that it's so accessible, I hardly ever do it anymore. Before you could do it here, I had an online account offshore. Was that illegal? I don't think it was. Anyway, but I hardly wager at all anymore, which is kind of the opposite of what you might expect. But I never forgot that lesson from my father, and I took that lesson as a kid and never forgot it. So I guess that just suggests, and we had this similar conversation when it came to the drug problem, and a story that I had read of someone whose life had been very similar to mine, mid-20s, relationship dissolves, family breaks up. I think there was a job loss in there, which was different for me, but eventually ended up taking drugs for the first time and becoming addicted. And I just thought back on myself and thought, boy, I guess, the stories were eerily similar to one another. And yet the choice for me was to get a couple of extra jobs to pay my way out of debt so that I could get back on my feet. And the choice for me after getting the lesson from my father was to bet, but only bet what I could afford to lose. It's not the same for everybody, clearly. That's really what I would love to get to the heart of, is what makes people make those different decisions. Because there has to be something in there. And we continue to be fascinated, for sure, by the human brain. I'll just use this as an opportunity to remind you, because I received an email from one of our regular listeners who admitted to the gambling problem that he had developed. And there is a Gamblers Anonymous meeting open to anyone who wishes to take part on Mondays at 7 at the Rockway Community Centre in Kitchener. So if you're so inclined, feel free to check it out. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio. As you heard during All News Mornings with Christine Clark and Mark Douglas, another local councillor is throwing their hat into the provincial political ring. Rob Deutschman, a regional councillor representing Kitchener, has won, so will run for the Liberal Party in the Ontario election, which surely is only weeks away, right? We'll find out Rob's reasons for looking for the switch and his message to those who voted for him locally. That's coming up as Rob Deutschman joins the show. The Mike Farwell Show, that is, 570 News Radio. As you heard this morning with Christine Clark and Mark Douglas during All News Mornings, there is another familiar name in the provincial election race. It's a familiar name because he is currently elected to regional council, but has said also that he will resign that seat. Rob Deutschman, regional councillor for Kitchener. Are you still that, or are you no longer that now? Is it over already?
Yeah, it's the former regional councillor for the Region of Waterloo.
All right, the former regional councillor who now intends on running provincially for the Liberals in Cambridge.
Yes.
Why?
Well, Mike, it's an interesting thing. As you know, when I first decided to run for regional council, you had me in to talk about it and what was the issue back then. And I said the issue of homelessness and what was happening in our community was a big issue. Having spent 2 years around that horseshoe, having gone through 3 budgets and seen the impact that the provincial initiatives are having on the local levy, and I use that phrase because, as you know, that's a Cam Guthrie phrase called the pill.
Yes.
Right? Which is the provincial, and that's where I got it from, Cam, as well. So it's the provincial initiatives, local levy. And what he's pointing out, and what we're all pointing out, is what the impact of downloading of various provincial programs is having on our community. And the budgets have gone from about $140 million in cost to our community to up to $180 million on the provincial side. Now, I've heard Chair Redmond talk about even a higher number that includes some of the federal programs as well. So,
I think I've heard it upwards of $400 million.
Yeah, and that's when you were interviewing her about that. I remember hearing that. So that shocked me actually, because we were always dealing with the provincial issue more than the federal. So as I'm sitting there, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at what's happening in Ontario over the past 6 years. And what's going on around all of us with respect to our hospitals, our family doctors. You know, people are unable to get a family doctor. Number of people that can't get a family doctor is up. The number of people that are waiting in emergency rooms is up. The time that they're waiting is up. There's a lot of things that are happening around us. Our school systems are the infrastructure is deteriorating. Lots of those things are going on, and I'm thinking, you know, we are passing our budgets. We are, having these very large increases, and everyone's saying, why isn't it 2%? Why isn't it the rate of inflation? Why is it 9%? And a big factor is these downloads, the housing crisis that we have in our community. And I felt that it was necessary. And you've had Doug Craig on a number of times talking about the provincial municipal relationship and the funding model and how we need to find a new funding model. And I just felt that now is the time, given my municipal experience, to step up and say, hey, I think we need more people with municipal background at the provincial level to start to work on these issues and look at them more closely. I think there's been too much of a provincial download and downtelling to municipalities, poor phrase, but you get the idea, of saying you're not building enough, you're not doing this enough. And I think there's a real misunderstanding. There's not enough, I feel, local municipal experience at the provincial level and people with good experience to talk about that relationship and see what we can do. It's got to be a collaborative approach, and we're not seeing that from our local MPPs.
All right. You're not new to any of this, and you're nobody's fool, Rob Deutschman. You are a former mayor in North Dumfries, which also had a term, because as a mayor, you're on regional council. Now you've got this experience. Yeah. But if you were to be successful provincially with the Liberals, I think they still fit in the minivan, don't they? Are they up to 9 seats? Whatever it is. Right. It's a very small number. So how do you anticipate being able to affect change from what could be a very small representation at Queen's Park? Right.
So my view on it is this. First of all I can do is what I can do. Right. So like in life, it's like I tell my nephew Matt. Okay. So I tell Matty, look, all you can do is give your best effort at whatever you're doing. There are so many other pieces that have to happen in order for you to have a certain success that you can't control those. But if you don't give it your best effort, then you're absolutely going to fail. So my view is I'm giving it my best effort to win this seat in Cambridge, which takes a seat away from the Conservatives, Progressive Conservative Party, puts a seat in the column for the Liberal Party. And my goal is, my hope is that the Liberals will become the official opposition in a minority Conservative government. We've had 6 years of a majority Conservative government, and you can see what's happening in our province. Now, to me, the old question is, are you better off now than you were 4 or 6 years ago, right? That's the standard political question. And to be fair, we had COVID. So I don't want to say like, oh, look, we're worse off because of this, that, and COVID is a factor. But the Premier himself doesn't ask that question. He tells us, he says, you're better off today than you were 6 years ago when we took over. So fair enough. Now he's put the question in play. He's put the issue of COVID in play. And I say to everyone, take a look at it. Ask yourself, are you better off? Are your kids better off today than they were 6 years ago? What about rent? What about being able to buy a house? Employment is up. Food bank use is up. Homelessness is up. How are we better in Ontario 6 years later? So that was my major impetus for running. But, events, dear boy events, as the phrase is, right? Now we've got the Trump tariffs. And look, I fully support Premier Ford's efforts on Team Canada. And he's right. It has to be a Team Canada approach involving all parties across the country with the federal government. But I say, what's going on in Ontario? Where's the Team Ontario approach to this as well? Right now, it's centered on the Premier. It's all about, I need this, I need that. And Mike, do you really believe he needs more than the majority he has currently to do what he needs to do? I mean, does he need a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious majority? I mean, he's got the biggest majority you could possibly have. When people get elected, Mike, here's the thing. When people get elected in politics, our first goal is to ensure the safety of our community. But the people elect us because they're saying, hey, I think you have the good sense, the common sense, the background, the experience that I want in someone to make decisions for me, whatever they may be. Because when you run an election, you don't know all the issues that are going to pop up during the course of your term. We've got, for example, the Wilmot Land Assembly going on. Well, that wasn't something that was on the radar when we were running. And we're not going to now have a plebiscite or an election just to deal with these substantial major issues because people say, look, you're using your common sense, and if I don't like what you did at the end of your term, I'll vote you out. I'll use the power of my vote. And so now we're in the situation where some of us, like Colleen James and myself, have stepped up to say, look, we want to make some change now. But don't forget who's caused this. The Premier is the one that's causing the early election. He's got 2 more years to go in his mandate. He's using it now. And why is he using it? The reasons keep changing. He will not be able to answer. And I know you and I have looked at that book, the Peterson, the 1990 election. The question of why are you running? Why are you calling this election? Dogged Peterson through the whole time of the election because he couldn't answer that question. And Doug Ford cannot answer that question. To say, because I need the mandate to spend tens of billions of dollars, what is he talking about? What's the plan here? What tens of billions of dollars? Who amongst all the party leaders doesn't support doing what we can to help our communities, help our businesses, help everybody in Ontario? Nobody does. I think the question should be, if he decides to call this election, is who do you want managing this for you? It's not a matter of he doesn't need a super mandate for tens of billions of dollars. And tell us what the plan is if you're going to do that. We don't even have that. This is a populist premier who has knee-jerk reactions. And when that knee-jerks, we get it in the butt.
Rob Deutschman is a now former regional councillor who is running for the Liberal Party provincially in Cambridge. And Rob has resigned. We've talked about this off air, and you know how I feel about local councillors making these decisions. I would prefer the resignation and then a subsequent by-election, etc. We'll talk more about now your message to the people that you are leaving from regional council as we continue in studio with Rob Deutschman on the Mike Farwell Show this morning. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Rob Deutschman joins us in studio this morning. He is now a former regional councillor because he has resigned his seat on regional council and is running as the Liberal candidate for Cambridge in the provincial election. Rob, what is your message just over halfway through your 4-year municipal term to those voters who brought you to regional council?
Sure. And I was just going to say, I guess I'm a 2-time former regional councillor.
That's right.
Look, to the people that voted for me and the people that I worked for at regional council, I just want to say please don't take this as any disrespect with respect to your vote. I mean, I value people's vote and the trust that they put in me to act on their behalf. Mike, as you know, I truly love the municipal level of politics. I do a podcast called Old Grey Mayors, which is completely dedicated to interviewing people that are former municipal politicians. I have a huge love for municipal politics. I always say to people, it's like when my daughters were growing up, they had this game called Sims, and it's like creating communities on the computer. And I can tell by your reaction, you may not have heard of that.
I was a little bit old for that, but I remember it, yes.
I don't know if your daughter may have played it or not, but a lot of people out there will know about it. And being a municipal politician is like a real-life Sims game. You have this opportunity to, create community centers, roads, and build your community in many ways and try to make it as positive as possible. However, after 2 years of being there and seeing what was happening, I felt that it was necessary for me, especially since this election was being called early, to step up. And I'm still advocating on behalf of, in this case, it's specifically the people of Cambridge and North Dumfries, but anything I can do to create a more positive relationship between the province and the municipality, anything I can do to assist in the funding model that goes back and forth will help the whole of the region. And so from my perspective, I'm still working on behalf of the people of the region. And I know we've had that discussion about, your view, and it's been in the radio about people should resign before they go ahead. And I didn't resign because of your view, but we align on this point. But I just feel that for people like Colleen and myself, we are still true to our goal, which is to help the people of Waterloo Region in this capacity by stepping up. I equate this to not like a promotion. I mean, to me, politics is like community involvement. My career is a lawyer. Okay, my career is not a politician. When I get involved in politics, it's because I'm trying to help people in my community, because I know the power that you have as a lawmaker in your community and the changes that you can make to affect a lot of people. But what we're doing is we're stepping up. And so I equate it, Mike, and I'll put it in the hockey terms for you, okay? So, it's like the Air Centennials, all right? They were a junior D team. Now they're a junior B team. So they moved from one to another. They're still representing the community of Ayr in hockey, but they're at a different level. And that's sort of what's happening here. We're moving from the municipal sphere to the provincial sphere, but it's still all for the benefit of the hometown crowd.
Why do you think hockey analogies are the only ones I understand?
I think you're good for the hockey analogy.
Okay. Why did you make the choice to resign as opposed to take a leave of absence?
Yeah, so for myself, everyone comes to this from a different background, different experiences, different stages in life, different paths. And there is no right answer. I know you like to debate the issue with your callers and try to convince those that have a differing view to your view. But that, it just doesn't always happen so neatly like that. My view was where I was at and what I was doing, and given my background and everything else, I felt that was the right decision for me. It doesn't affect my abilities, and it doesn't affect, as far as I'm concerned, anyone else's abilities if they decide not to. And as you recall, Aisling Clancy did the same thing, and she was there for 5 months. She decided to step up and run at the provincial level for whatever her reasons were. And the people of Kitchener Centre said, yeah, that's fine. So I don't think, and I know that's your riding, so the majority of the people that voted in your election were happy with that.
But then the majority of people, the rest of the riding, this is where it really bugs me, Rob.
The majority of the people that voted.
Because they got an appointment. And I think Stephanie Stretch is wonderful. She was on the show earlier today.
Yeah.
But she didn't get the most votes. That's why all I'm asking is that it go to resign and win it back in a by-election.
I know, now you're trying to convince me.
I would like to convince you.
All I'll say is she got the second most votes, so that's fine too.
All right, I'm not going to convince you on it, but I am glad, even though you didn't do it for me, that you chose to resign. I wish you the best of luck. It's been a busy morning. Your name is all over the news today. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I heard that you had some complaint. I won't say whining, although some other people might, about the temperature in here. And so I was just thinking, I know you have the David Schooley sponsored broadcast booth. Maybe we could have the Rob Deutschman Cambridge Provincial Liberal candidate sponsorship for this booth. I mean,
saying that 8 to 10 times a show. I mean, I'm a shoo-in to win this election.
If you can fix the temperature, I might just consider it. Best of luck, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for all you do.
Rob Deutschman, former regional councillor, now your candidate in Cambridge for the Liberal Party for that provincial election that's probably getting called by next week. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Rob Deutschman said something that struck a chord. It's got me thinking. He says, you like to put your opinion out there and then convince everybody else it's the right one and they should see it your way. And he's probably not wrong about that. I suspect I'm not entirely alone. I do spend some time formulating my opinions. I back them up with the reasons why I have arrived at that conclusion. But perhaps I could be less forceful in saying this is the way it has to be, although I don't know that would make for as compelling a program. But I'm open to the other side of the argument. It's just that when it comes to, and I have to make sure I remain open and keep these ears open, but when it comes to municipal politicians making the choice to seek higher office, by all means, I'm for it. I like the ambition. I have ambition, and I want you to have it too. I think it's a great characteristic. What I think should happen is a by-election so that voters can decide then if they want you back in the office that you said, however temporarily, you wished to abandon. And I want to make sure also that the local issues remain important and that we emphasize their importance. That's where I'm coming from. And I'm not sure. I don't feel as though, frankly, voters locally get their votes treated the way they ought. Let's go to the phones quickly. Mike, good morning.
Yeah, you seem much more pragmatic in your columns in the newspaper than you do on the radio. I wish you would have questioned him about how much money this is costing us for another election while he runs for...
Well, it's not, I mean, that's up to Doug Ford, right? That's what's costing us. Doug Ford's calling the election, not Rob Deutschman.
No. I mean, for him to pack in the regional, and now we have to have another regional election I'm talking about. He's costing us money.
That's up to the regional government, what they want to do. But I think you know what, Mike, I don't think we put a price on democracy.
Yeah. But anyways, he talked like a liberal. I mean, I listened to him for, it must have been over 10 minutes, and basically he said nothing. I wish you would have asked him if he's going to raise taxes or lower taxes. That's a good way to make a liberal squirm.
Well, but I think you have a misunderstanding of how this is going to work. Even if he's successful as a liberal, it ain't going to be a majority. So Rob Deutschman personally isn't going to raise a damn thing.
Well, if he had but you're going to ask him if he has the option to raise the taxes, would he? I mean, the liberals don't like to answer that question because their policy is generally tax, borrow, spend every time they get in power. Like when McGuinty and Wynne tripled the debt.
All right, I get it. I got to run to get the news. The bigger philosophical conversations. I'm still a little chafed personally that our conservative government right now is whizzing away money with rebate checks, but that's a conversation for another day. Hey, would you like less salt used on our roads? I sure as heck would, and there's technology that might help us do that. We'll talk about it coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers. Raise your hand if the amount of salt we use to combat snow and ice drives you a little nuts, pun intended. My hand's in the air. I can't get over. I mean, I get it because nobody wants to be responsible and they want to dodge the liability bullet as best they can, but we overuse it. There's no question that we overuse it. What if there were technology that could help us stop this excessive use of salt? Well, maybe there is. Seth Dworkin is a professor and Canada Research Chair in Mechanical and Industrial Engineering at Toronto Metropolitan University. Joins the program. Seth, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much, not only for being on the show, but for bringing forward borehole thermal energy storage. Tell me it's possible, Seth, that we can use less salt.
Well, it's possible that we can use less salt, and others are already doing it. It's not cheap, but it is a very valuable potential technology for us.
Okay, so it's BTES, borehole thermal energy storage. How does it work?
Well, it uses the same principles as geothermal heat pumps, which we put in buildings all over Canada. So the idea is that under roadways or sidewalks or bike lanes, where we don't want snow or ice to sit, we would be putting in piping systems and running essentially warm water underneath through the winter with a little bit of antifreeze, so nothing freezes, and be providing heat to melt the snow and ice as it hits the ground. The heat would be coming from summertime, so it would be essentially free solar heat that would be absorbed by those same pipes, stored underground throughout the fall, and then brought up in winter to keep the roadways clear.
Where in the world is this being applied successfully?
So there have been some pilot projects in Sweden and Belgium, but actually throughout North America, we have private properties. There's some ski resorts, for example, which do this for their driveways, their parking lots, and their sidewalks already. So we know the technology works.
So you mentioned the expense, and this is where my mind goes next, because I recall talking to, and forgive me, I forget the municipality. I think they were in Michigan, but regardless, last winter about a similar system that they were employing to keep sidewalks in their municipality clear of snow and ice. But it was a small section, small-ish anyway, relative to the municipality of their downtown. So can we scale this? Like, I mean, could we use it on the 401? Or if we were to use it on the 401, how does that, like, what's the cost of that look like?
Well, we wouldn't be looking at starting with large segments of highways. We would first start by targeting areas that are prone to black ice, car accidents, and other types of accidents. So maybe steep inclines or bridges that freeze. So I think of, for example, in the Toronto area, the Don Valley Parkway, where there's a lot of incline ramps that go down into the valley, and those can become very slippery and treacherous. And so the idea would be to provide this type of technology in those areas first. It can go for large areas, but you wouldn't be looking at doing an entire highway at any point soon. You would be wanting to do it piecemeal, bit by bit, throughout the cities, and throughout areas that are difficult to plow, high-density areas where we don't want to slow down traffic with ice and plowing, and, of course, fender benders.
What do maintenance costs look like once a system is installed?
So the maintenance costs are very low, far lower than the cost of plowing and salt. It's the initial costs which are higher. So the initial cost of drilling the boreholes under or near the roadways, that's the large capital cost that we have to get through. And then there's a payback period on that, because you don't need to be using salt. You don't need to be plowing. There's also the toll of accidents. So if we can reduce car accidents, fender benders, there is a reduced cost to the public. There's improved health and safety. And, of course, there's also the issue of salt getting into groundwater and drinking water, and you have far less environmental degradation, and that has a cost as well. What we need are detailed studies of the payback periods and the costs on these. Preliminary data would show that the payback periods are reasonable, 10 to 15 years, which is akin to what we see for geothermal systems going into buildings for heating and cooling.
And I suspect, Seth, this would be the sort of thing, if it continues to show success in more and more models, that we could build into our infrastructure then when we either build new or repair existing.
Yes, and as we all know, road repairs in Canada every summer are ubiquitous. We already have crews out. We have road repairs. We're repairing water mains under the roads. So the additional cost of putting in the piping systems can be lowered through tacking it onto those types of repairs. For the building and repairing of bridges or the building of new roadways, yes, there would be ways to make this more efficient for sure.
We talked about those pilot projects, if you will, Belgium, Sweden, etc. Are there any jurisdictions in Canada or even North America that are employing BTES? And if not, how do we get them to try it?
So there are jurisdictions who are employing BTES, but not for roadway clearing. They're doing it for groups of buildings. So thermal storage, again, the idea is that the sun heats up. Maybe you have solar panels for heat collectors in the summer. We're storing that heat underground in the winter, but then we're using that heat not to melt snow and ice, but to warm condition space, office buildings, commercial buildings, and so on. So we know the technology works. It's the exact same technology. There's nothing really new that would be required to apply this to roadways. And I should add that I like what you said about salt being a nuisance on the roads. It's bad for our cars. It leads to rusting. It would also just make for a more pleasant cityscapes.
That's an excellent point. I hadn't really noticed or considered until relatively recently that sort of white film that is always on roads that are clear of ice and snow is because that's the residue, obviously, of the salt that was once there.
Yes, exactly. And I should add that, it's well established that the lifetime of cars, typically a car in Canada will last 8, 10, 12 years before it starts to rust, depending on what type of rust proofing we've done. In places where they don't have winter snow, for example, in the southern United States, cars last longer because they don't rust through. So that's another advantage we could be looking at maybe not in the near future, but as we can reduce salt on the roads, we can reduce harm to our vehicles as well.
I'm all on board. I think this is fascinating stuff, and I'm so glad you could join the show to talk more about it. Seth, thank you very much for being here today.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Seth Dworkin is a professor and Canada Research Chair in Mechanical and Industrial Engineering at Toronto Metropolitan University. BTES, Borehole Thermal Energy Storage. Why don't we use that to reduce ice and snow on our walkways and on our roadways? Pardon the complete aside here, but I should have mentioned at the outset of this conversation, if you were wondering where in HE double hockey sticks Gary Chalk is, because Thursday mornings at 10:30, Gary Chalk is here with Living Retired. Gary's living a little under the weather this week and was unable to be with us. So we'll pick up again next week with our usual Thursday morning 10:30 segment. But I couldn't resist this research from Toronto Metropolitan University and getting Seth on the show to talk about it. I wish it were applicable on a grander scale, but I'll take it at this scale. I just so happen to be, this is something we've talked about before. You know how much it chafes my chaps. And look, I get it. If you are in the property maintenance business, I feel you. I can only imagine how high those insurance rates are, those insurance premiums are that you're paying, and why what many of us would look at as an excessive use of salt is basically the trade-off, right? Because that's far less expensive than any lawsuit that you will be subjected to. And again, those insurance premiums are only going up. This is how we roll these days. And it drives me bananas. Absolutely bananas. I happened to be watching the CTV News at 6 the other night, and there's my buddy Jeff Pickle, who used to work here. Let's not forget his roots, okay? But he was doing a story from the University of Waterloo, and no disrespect to Jeff, but all I could see was the walkway behind him leading into the UW student residence, and you could barely see the pavement. It was layered in salt. And again, I get it, but I wish it wasn't so. And that's why I'm all for borehole thermal energy storage. Surely we can reduce the use of salt, right? Who's with me on this? 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Yep, it's going to cost more up front, but the payoff to me sounds fantastic. Not only environmentally, your vehicles will last longer, your clothes are going to look better because they're not going to be salt stained. How many more benefits do you want? Let me know your thoughts on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
So thermal storage, again, the idea is that the sun heats up. Maybe you have solar panels for heat collectors in the summer. We're storing that heat underground in the winter, but then we're using that heat to warm condition space, office buildings, commercial buildings, and so on. So we know the technology works. It's the exact same technology. There's nothing really new that would be required to apply this to roadways.
Seth Dworkin is a professor and Canada Research Chair in Mechanical and Industrial Engineering at Toronto Metropolitan University. Joins us to talk about heat storage technologies and how they could keep our roads and bridges ice-free all winter long without the use of salt. It's called Borehole Thermal Energy Storage, or BTES. And as much as I would love to see our 400 series highways equipped with this technology, Seth understandably talks about a targeted approach to steep inclines or declines, bridges, etc., walkways, bike paths, you name it. Trevor sends an email to Mike at 570news.com with photos of, it wasn't completely clear, but I believe to be the business that he operates, and the salt that gets trucked into or brought into the business that he operates because of people coming in and out, and the snow comes off their boots or footwear, whatever it is that they're wearing, and he's got to clean it up inside his place of business, and the result is, of course, an absolute mess. And that's the least of, really, I believe, the problems. Our water systems, environmental damage caused by the excessive use of salt. How about my poor puppy when we go for walks? It breaks my heart to see her have to hobble a little bit when she gets a piece of salt in her paw. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Donna, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. I understand the salt issue and everybody's concern about it. The biggest thing, and I've worked with a lot of property maintenance, landscaping, the biggest problem is you have to put the salt down because of the slip and falls and the money that these people expect to get. I mean, they're putting the landscaping businesses in jeopardy because of these slips and falls. So they have to cover themselves by putting the excessive salt down. And I know it's not a good thing, but you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't.
No, you know what, Donna? I agree. I hear you, and I feel for them, because these are people, working hard, doing good business, and insurance premiums have gone up to such a rate that I get it. I totally get it. It's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
It is a vicious cycle, and I feel for the people that have slipped and fallen, but the system just does not go friendly on the landscaping businesses, because people look at dollars and cents and they go, whoa, I slipped and fell, I can get big bucks. And that's just not the way it is.
I couldn't agree more. Appreciate the call, Donna. Thank you.
Thanks.
Enjoy your day. I'll tell you, and this, I know it's just me, and Rob Deutschman told me earlier, I can't make you see it my way, but I'll tell you how I see it. And I shared this with my buddy the other night. I was out for a walk with Rosie, the pandemic pup. It was way before the deep freeze, a couple of weeks back now. And there was a driveway that I passed, a short driveway with a downspout that was directed down the driveway to the sidewalk. And because the driveway was so short, the water coming out, freezing on the way down, and it left a nice patch of ice, like a nice one, on the sidewalk. And so I see this as I'm approaching it. I'm going to be extra careful here. And then I thought, well, what if I did fall? What if I did? Well, again, I saw the ice. It's wintertime. I better be careful around this. And I was, and I got by safely. If I was less safe, if I took less care, I might have slipped and fallen. And if I had, my mission would have been, hey, can we please get this person to redirect their downspout? Because this doesn't work well in the winter, right? It's causing a problem. Just direct it onto your grass or something instead of onto the sidewalk. That's all I would ask for. Because if I slip and fall, I slipped and fell. But what do I know? I guess I don't see dollar signs often enough. Sure as hell not on my paycheck anyway. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just over a minute until your 11 a.m. update. Let's get back to the phones, hear more from you about the overuse of salt. Steve, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Love the show. Just wanted to put my 2 cents in because it's a good way to pass the time. It comes down to liability, as we've sort of touched upon. Maybe we need to take a look at, I know it's been talked about many times, but municipalities shoveling the infrastructure that they own, maintaining it, such as the sidewalk, but then also maybe looking at some sort of responsibility for the users. Like, if you're going to go out on a surface, you can physically see there's ice. People need to take responsibility, and of course that includes myself too. Like, it's treacherous out there, and if you're going to walk on ice, I know many times people don't have an option of not walking from point A to point B, but you can take due care and have common sense.
I think that's an excellent point made by you, Steve. I think there has to be some sort of balance here because the pendulum has swung too far towards liability, in my opinion. An update from the 570 News Center, and then a throwback Thursday. How would you like to take your former school and turn it into your current home? That's what one woman in Cambridge has done, and we'll meet her next on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio. Imagine taking the school that you once attended and turning it into your forever home. For some of us, we may shudder at the thought. Maybe the school doesn't have happy memories. But I think Becky Berry, well, I know she feels differently about Dickey Settlement Schoolhouse because it is now that home for her. And Becky joins our show this morning. Good morning, Becky.
Good morning, Mike.
It is so nice to have you on the show. I love this. Well, we get to see each other in person, but finally we can have a conversation that doesn't involve asparagus or fundraising.
Yes, or coffee.
Or coffee.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
I'm always happy to talk about your Blacksmith and Bean coffee, too. Believe me.
Oh, well, yeah, shout out to Blacksmith and Bean Coffee, courtesy of my brother Tim and my nephew Will.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're doing great work with it. Let's talk about Dickey Settlement Schoolhouse and what that schoolhouse meant to your family, Becky.
Right. So I grew up very close to the school, and so this was where I went as a student and had wonderful, wonderful years at this small rural school it was when I went here. And it sort of ran in the family because not only did myself and my siblings attend, but my dad and his siblings attended, and his dad and his siblings attended, as well as my grandma's siblings. So it's kind of a long line of family love for this place. And when it was closing, my nieces were attending here. So we've actually got, I guess that's 4 generations of folks in the family who attended here, and all of us loved it.
Absolutely incredible. 4 generations of Berries in that same schoolhouse, and then it's closing, and it shows up on the market, and you decide, I could turn this into a home?
Yeah, well, I was quite devastated when I heard that the schoolhouse was closing, and because not only was it part of education for us, but it was a real magnet for the community for gatherings. If a girl was getting married, her bridal shower would be here. The Farmers Club would meet here. There was always a community Christmas party held here. So it was a real hub for the community. And so it was a lot of sadness for people when they heard it was closing. And I just remember being so determined that I was going to end up here. And I had a small catering business, and I just thought it'd be perfect to set up shop and to also live here and turn it into a home.
Well, you talk about what the building meant to the community, and of course, it was around as a schoolhouse for so long, and you have continued to open what is now your home to that community, and particularly alumni of the school.
Yes. So last November, I had a realization that I'd actually been here for 25 years, and I thought to myself, that's reason for a celebration. And it was like, what to do? And probably I thought the best thing to do would be to invite people back who had a love for this place. And so I gathered up a wonderful committee of local people, some who had attended here, and we put together an event. It was just an afternoon, and we invited back students and former staff, and really anybody who was interested in the schoolhouse. And we had a wonderful turnout, and also people from the community showed up too, because just they love this place so much. So we had a great day. We had about 120 register, but we know there were a few that slipped past the registration table. So we were really, really pleased with the turnout and the interest in the place.
As you went through the process, Becky, of renovating a former schoolhouse into a home that you would live in, did you find anything interesting along the way?
Oh, that's a great question, Mike. So plumbing was a huge issue here, and we found things like pencils down drains. We found a sock down a drain. So there were lots of school shenanigans that had happened in the past. Out in the yard, I dug up in my gardening. I would dig up things like bits of pottery, a couple of old inkwells. Let me see what else. Well, the biggest deal that's kind of a mystery out in the yard is a time capsule. And I'd always heard that there was a time capsule buried in the yard when they closed the school. And I just always thought, what a fantastic thing that would be to uncover, now and see what it was like back then. Because apparently the students put in newspaper clippings and drawings and things that were personal to them. And so I had a guy come in with a metal detector and go all through the property, and nothing showed up. And then I found out later that it actually was buried in plastic. So we're probably not going to find it with a metal detector. But we've been doing some sleuthing, and we know who the student is who actually buried it. So we're trying to connect with him and see if he would ever stop in and point to the X marks the spot. Apparently he buried it back in his leaf fort.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So obviously this schoolhouse has tremendous meaning to the family. You've mentioned those 4 generations that have gone through, but not everyone has the fondest memories of their times at school. Right. Clearly it's different for you in this case. How do you feel today, Becky? Making a home, living in the place where you attended school. What kinds of memories does that bring up for you?
Well, I had a great experience at this school. And the teachers that we had, there was a trio of teachers that taught here for decades together. And they were wonderful. The original classroom has a stage. And I remember as a kid that the stage was even part of our learning. So when we would be learning about explorers, for example, say Marco Polo, we wouldn't just read it in our textbook, but we would act it out on the stage, because that's the kind of teachers that we had. So I have such fond memories. Recess was always a great time, and the only time we wouldn't be outside for recess was if there was a blizzard or a thunderstorm. So we spent a lot of time outside in the schoolyard. So when I walk around the schoolyard, it just makes me think, am I walking in the footsteps that, maybe my grandpa walked as a young boy. I'm kind of a sentimental person, so I guess I'm living in the right spot, being a sentimental person and having fond memories of this place.
I think it's a lovely story. Becky, I really appreciate you making time for the show today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Mike. It's been really great chatting with you.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Becky Berry of that Berry family, Berry's Asparagus in Cambridge, just on the cusp of North Dumfries there. Great little farm store in there. Blacksmith and Bean Coffee. It is, I've said that before, my absolute favorite. Nice little local product you can get. And every year, the Berries put on an incredible deep-fried asparagus fundraiser for Farwell for Hire in collaboration with the Schmuck Truck, which we just love doing. So I see Becky frequently on my visits to the farm, but just recently learned of her schoolhouse renovation, taking the schoolhouse that she and 3 other generations of her family attended and turning it into her forever home. Now, having been there for just over 25 years. I've been trying to work in the idea here on the show every week of a throwback Thursday. So this takes us back to what was once a schoolhouse that is now a home for somebody who attended. But it makes me think of the schools that we attended. And I thought maybe you'd want to throwback Thursday with me, some memories of that. I know already that I went to the best high school this region has ever known. No disrespect to those that still existed or that still exist today, but St. Jerome's High School, absolutely, hands down, the greatest high school that this community ever knew. But maybe you feel differently about yours. You think yours was the greatest. Maybe it was an elementary school. Have you gone back to visit, gone to a reunion? Was there a teacher that stood out? What was it that made your school stand out? Let's take a trip down memory lane from our academic days here on a Throwback Thursday on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
It was a lot of sadness for people when they heard it was closing. And I just remember being so determined that I was going to end up here. And I had a small catering business, and I just thought it'd be perfect to set up shop and to also live here and turn it into a home.
Becky Berry, one of 4 generations of Berries to go through the old Dickey Settlement Schoolhouse. And when the schoolhouse was closing, you hear Becky say right there, it was sad for so many, and she became determined to make something out of that former schoolhouse. It is now her home, and this past November, she held a bit of an alumni celebration. More than 100 people showed up to share some memories, and we thought, what a great Throwback Thursday topic to discuss. The schools that we attended and what made them special. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Joe, good morning.
Morning, Mike.
Fellow Jerry's boy.
That's right. So my first question to you is, how often did you have nightmares about being back in Jerome's, even when you started your career?
What do you mean,
did
nightmares?
You have dreams? How many times did you dream about the school?
How many times did I dream about the school? I don't know. Enough, I think. More than I can count off the top of my head.
So it's a thing. It's a thing, right?
To dream about St. Jerome's High School?
Yeah.
I guess.
You're back there, even years after you left.
Yeah.
Weird. Anyway, how cool would that be if we bought the school? Hey?
That'd be a hell of a house, Joe.
Yeah, well, you could turn one of the classrooms into like a man cave, another one into like a party room, another one into a big couple classrooms, amalgamate together for a big open kitchen. You'd have to turn the gym into a pickleball, squash, and tennis, and who knows what the hell.
There ain't gonna be no pickleball in my house, Joe. Come on, we want real games and sports in there.
You could play hockey in the hallway. Rollerblade.
Okay.
How cool would that be?
What made, aside from the fact that you still dream about it to this day, what made St. Jerome's special to you?
Probably the people and the culture. You know, it was we were always frowned upon. Remember? And meanwhile, we had like 1,200 girls across the street.
Yeah.
Nobody could ever figure that out, Mike. They couldn't do math in the public schools. So, but no, I had a great time. I met a lot of friends, and that's what sealed the deal for me. A couple of really interesting teachers, a couple of good priests, Father Mike Kandari being the best of the best. Remember him?
Do I remember him? The man, he was terrific. Just terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my experience. How about you?
Very similar. It was absolutely about the teachers, the culture, for sure. Father Mike. I still, when I go to North Bay, visit the Sports Hall of Fame because it's right in the same arena where the battalion play. And he is in the North Bay Sports Hall of Fame because, of course, that's where he's originally from and where he was, in fact, when he died in that car crash.
Mo Targus.
Oh, my gosh, Mr. Targus, yes.
Do you ever want to piss him off?
No. Brother Ed, you didn't want to piss him off either, no.
You think?
All right, Joe. Oh, thanks for the call. Listen, Joe and I are clearly of a certain vintage when discipline was a little bit different. And in all honesty, I don't have the fondest memories of my time in high school because as the principal's kid, it was not the easiest place to navigate. I mean, high school is already difficult enough to navigate because of where you are at in your life and the things that you are dealing with personally and, you know, the new friendships in the bigger schools and all of those different things. Add on your father being the principal, i.e. the top disciplinarian, and the number of people that he was rubbing the wrong way as he disciplined them. And I got the fallout from a lot of that. But as I look back now through, you know, the lens of 35 years ago, there were a lot of great things, particularly about that school, particularly with so many of the teachers who led it. The drama program that we had there was great. I give Alan Hoke, my drama teacher back in high school, tremendous credit for what he did for the school community. And I'll never forget, early on when I was filling in on one of our talk shows here on 570, and I happened to mention St. Jerome's High School kind of in passing, phones lit up and people just wanted to talk about their connection to St. Jerome's High School. Because, of course, with 125 years of history as a high school, it touched many, many lives in this community. It's the Mike Farwell Show on a Throwback Thursday, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. A Throwback Thursday takes us back to our school days. D-A-Z-E, right? Because we're all dazed out in school. Dave, you're not dazed. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. I attended supposedly the oldest high school in Ontario. And I won't ask you if you know what it is, but I'll tell you. It's Jarvis Collegiate in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
And I was a little bit of a rebel, and I attended the whole 5 years. That's grade 13. We had grade 13 in those days.
So did I.
And I somehow got sucked into a band, the school band. And we end up competing in the Kiwanis Festival, and we end up traveling to Montreal at a special event, put on an event in Montreal, and all that kept me out of trouble. And to this day, I can say that that's the thing that really kept my life on the more or less straight and narrow rather than being in a lot of trouble.
I love to hear that. The band saved you. In my high school band, none other than the legendary Danny Michel, who now continues a solo career, Rob Carley, who composes all of the music for Murdoch Mysteries. Pete Reitzel, I'm pretty sure, played with A Bunch of Wimps, which was our high school band at St. Jerome's. And Dave says the band at Jarvis Street saved him. The oldest school in Ontario, you don't say. All right, I got to get you to the 570 News Center for an update. And then on the front page of today's Waterloo Region Record, the local man with the baseball card worth tens of thousands of dollars. Are you collecting anything? And what might it be worth? The flip side coming up. Let's talk about our collectibles on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I want to know, like I really want to know, on the flip side today, what it is that you collect. And even if it's wives or husbands, I want to know about it. We'll count them all up together. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. I was inspired to ask the question by the story on the front page of today's Waterloo Region Record, which tells of Bob Smith as a young man working a summer job in the early 70s, making $1.25 an hour. And that's important. $1.25 an hour was Bob Smith's wage when he saw an ad in the newspaper that offered $1 for every pre-1953 baseball or hockey card. So it's the early 70s. The ad in the newspaper says, I'll give you $1 for every 20-year-old or more baseball or hockey card that you have. You're making $1.25 an hour. You're going to get $1 for every card. And Bob knew that there were a bunch of such cards in his family home's basement. And he thought to himself, he's not a collector, whatever. But he said to his mom, you know what? You can give the rest away, but I want to keep everything before 1953. And wouldn't you know, in that, because it's got to be pretty tempting, right? If you're making $1.25 an hour and somebody's going to give you $1 for every pre-1952 card, I'm starting to do the math and I'm thinking I'm going to do pretty well for myself here. But he hung on, and what, lo and behold, did he have in those pre-1953 baseball cards is a Mickey Mantle rookie card. And that rookie card, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best condition, is rated a 1. So it's not the best of condition, some bent corners, whatever. However, despite that, Miller & Miller Auctions in New Hamburg currently has a bidding, an auction going for it, and it's currently listed at $32,000. How do you like it? $32,000 for a baseball card. That's the reason, I guess, we collect things, right? Because we want them to be valuable someday, perhaps. Or maybe you just collect for the sake of collecting. What was it? Royal Dalton? China? What were the figurines? Did the Royal Dalton have the figurines too? Anyway, lots of different things that we could collect, and maybe we're hanging on to them because we think they're going to be worth something someday, or maybe we just do it because we like them. Cabbage Patch Kids, anyone? 519-570-2545. Star 570, 1-800-570-5715. George, what do you collect?
Good morning, Mike. Great story, by the way. I've been pursuing that particular card for years and years. Unfortunately, I don't have the $32,000 to buy, but it's a great card. I can even see it right now, the way it looks. It's a beautiful Mickey Mantle rookie. For years and years, I collected old, I think I told you before, old baseball and hockey cards. But my new passion over the last little while has been NFL cards that are numbered, specifically numbered, autographed, and also the patch, the actual material patch from the jersey.
I've seen that too. It's one of the new things they add to, I guess, the collectible, eh?
So that's been my new passion over the last year or so, collecting those, and it's just amazing what's out there, and I love it.
Do you have any hope, George, that it turns into something very valuable someday?
I do have a few. I have a Jim Kelly that I hope will be worth something someday, and a few others. So we'll have to see.
Guess we will. George, appreciate the call. Great to hear from you. Just makes me think about, for years and years, George says, and just going back to what we talked about in the last half hour with a bit of a throwback Thursday to the schools we attended. This is actually a former high school teacher of mine. Actually, I never had him as a teacher, but he was one of the teachers at the high school and good friends of my parents to this day. And Coca-Cola you name it. If it says Coca-Cola on it, be it a can, a bottle, whatever, he's got a massive collection of Coca-Cola memorabilia. I used to collect, I was a Pepsi guy, because you want to talk about another throwback? How about Kitchener Beverages there at the corner of Fairway and Wilson, where the Shoppers Plaza is now, right? Kitchener Beverages, that's right. Mr. Moser, I'm talking to you. Family members worked there. My Uncle Jim worked there back in the day. We were Pepsi drinkers. At least I was in the Farwell household. I think most of us were across the board. But for a while, I got into the Pepsi collecting stuff because I thought, wow, Coke's easy. Coke's big. Coke's the giant. Everybody can find Coke stuff. I'd go to these flea markets, try to find all the Pepsi memorabilia I could. I'd save cans. I'd collect bottles, all kinds of different stuff. And then eventually I'm like, I'm moving an awful lot in my life. I don't need to keep moving my entire Pepsi collection. And so that was kind of the end of that. But it could be something like that too. Steve, what do you collect?
I collect hockey jerseys and poker chips. Well, not poker chips, but casino chips.
Really? Oh, okay. So yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting hobby. Lots of good stories. Met a lot of good people. Since I got into playing poker way back when, I just kind of fell in love with the diversity of the chips and the edge spots and the colors, and I started displaying them at home and stuff that I bring home from casinos. And then I just started collecting the more rare stuff from old Las Vegas and the history behind them. Every chip has its own little story, especially from all the illegal casinos and stuff like that. You can find those chips, and yeah, it's an interesting hobby for sure. And the people who collect them are pretty interesting, especially when you get chips from games where like guys like Helmuth and guys you've handled those chips. It's interesting in that respect.
You talk about old Vegas, like you got to go. You forget the Strip. When you're there, you have to go down to the old Fremont Street.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of that.
No,
it's probably one of the funnier stories I can recall with a Vegas trip was one of our members. We have a large group of us. He went and harvested chips from pretty much every casino on there and put them all in his luggage, but he had them wrapped into stacks so they don't get damaged. And when he put his luggage through the thing, the security guard waved him over. All kinds of alarms went off. People came running from all to and fro. He didn't know what the hell was going on, and they had him patted down and pretty much arrested on the spot. And they let him take a picture of the X-ray, and it actually looked like he had sticks of dynamite in his luggage. It was freaking hilarious.
I thought you were going to say the giant joint or something.
No, it looked like he had a bomb in his suitcase because he had the clay chips all packed. It was pretty funny. We had a pretty good laugh at that. So it was a learning moment for the rest of us to make sure that when you're going through, you declare that you've got a bunch of poker chips in your luggage.
Right. Excellent story. Thanks for calling, Steve. Good to hear from you. Appreciate it. There you go. Poker chips. I never thought of that one. My buddies and I got into it too, playing our home games. Even before, Hold'em poker became all the rage and you could see it on every sports channel and stuff like that. And we spent good money back then on a nice set of clay poker chips. And we joked back at the time, because it was significant money for guys that we had just basically finished college. Anyway, and we said, but amortized over the lifetime of our poker games, this is going to be cheap. And sure enough, we played those poker games for decades. Grant, what do you collect?
Well, I only collected 3 of them, but it was the Coke cans that had, the Toronto Blue Jays. Oh, yeah. Winning the
World Series.
The World Series, and then my brother took one of them, drank, and I said, yeah, he saw it sitting there, and I said, no, it's not worth nothing.
Well, that's it. But you know what? It quenched his thirst, Grant. It quenched his thirst. I had one of those Blue Jays World Series cans for quite some time, too, even though, as I said before, I was a Pepsi collector back in the day, not Coke. Chris, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Not bad.
Good. What do you collect?
Seagram's memorabilia.
Seagram's. I like that. Little local flavor to it.
Well, my grandfather built the barrels that used to be located where the barrel yard is now on Herb Street. And there was a stack of barrels in a pyramid, and he was one who built those barrels. So we always had an attachment to the Seagrams because it was part of the family history.
That's very cool. So what kind of Seagram's memorabilia do you have?
I have advertisements from magazines from like World War One. You have your glassware, goblets. Seagram's had really a lot of different. They have ashtrays, they have pitchers, all kinds of things.
Ashtrays. You remember the days, Chris, where you'd go into an office and there'd be an ashtray on the desk, or you'd go into a restaurant and there'd be an ashtray in the middle of the table?
Just thinking about how smoky those rooms were back in the day.
I can't even imagine. We used to have ashtrays in our cars, kids. We really did. Not so much anymore. You know, I don't have many regrets, and this is not on the large scale of regrets, I acknowledge. But a friend of mine years ago, it was actually during Farwell for Hire. I'd done some work at their place, and she gifted me one of the barrels that had been in that pyramid that Chris refers to outside Seagram's distillery in Waterloo. And I'm like, I got it. Like, this is an amazing piece of local history. And you know me, I love this place, and to have that little piece of it, I thought was the coolest thing. But you know what I went and done? Absolutely nothing. And I just let the barrel rot and fall apart, and ultimately that's it. I just chucked it. There was nothing I could do. I let it go completely to waste. I should have taken the time to restore those bands, fix it all up and make it a meaningful part of something. I saw some home. It was either on TV or a photo in a newspaper or something, but their living room, open concept, kitchen, whatever, had a nice whiskey barrel as part of the decor. I could have done that with one of them Seagram's barrels, but I went and messed it all up. I'm such a dum-dum sometimes. Hey, what do you collect? That's the question we're asking on the Flipside today, and we love to hear your stories on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. So Bob Smith of Kitchener. Yeah, Bob, that's your real name. Anyway, Bob Smith has in his possession, well, for now anyway, a Mickey Mantle rookie card. It's on auction at Miller & Miller in New Hamburg, and the price on it is currently $32,500. Not bad for something he had the wherewithal to hang on to, even though he wasn't an avid collector. But he knew there were a bunch of cards in the basement at home, and when he saw an ad in the newspaper that said, "We'll pay you $1 for every card that you have, hockey, baseball, whatever, that is pre-1953, we'll just give you $1 flat out for all of them." This was back in the 70s. And Bob, he's a smart guy. He's like, I don't know. There's a reason they're asking for that. So anyway, he hangs on to it now. He's got a $32,000+ card in his hands that's currently on auction. Made me think about the things that we collect, and even better if that turned into some money for you. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. Rob sends an email to Mike at 570news.com. Mike, most collectibles are worthless. Younger people are not interested in carrying around such junk. I have for years carried collectible plates with official PW. I don't know what PW is. Sorry. I held on to 8 tracks, 8, and didn't get anything for them. I'm not surprised about that, Rob, because, 8 tracks. And Mary Ann's email to Mike at 570news.com. I collect Royal Dalton figurines and movies, many of them horror films. I love them. I wish I collected more. I kind of stopped because I thought, well, now everything's on a streaming service. But it's not. Not everything is on a streaming service. I need more movies in my life. Let's get back to the phones. Walter, what do you collect?
How are you there, Mike?
I'm well, thanks.
Yeah, good. I used to collect floor lamps, if you can believe it.
I cannot believe that. What the heck would you collect floor lamps for?
Because the places that I was living at the time and moving around, they didn't have, light switches on the wall with lights in the ceilings. So we needed floor lamps, and they were all in the 50s, 40s, and 60s. And, I had a huge shop then. I had a 2,000 square foot shop, so I had all kinds of room to put everything. And then I moved, and it got a lot smaller of a shop.
Isn't that the way, right? See, the bigger the house, the more place to store our crap, Walter.
Yeah. So anyways, I had to get rid of them, and now all my kids, are chastising me because I got rid of them because they're hard to get now, and so that's what I collected back then, up till about 15 or 20 years ago, and I had a whole pile of them, and so they're all gone, and so now you know what I collect now, Mike? Memories, buddy. Memories.
Attaboy.
That's what I collect now.
I love it. Thanks, Walter. I love it. I did not expect to hear floor lamps, but I love that you're out there collecting memories. Good way to look at it. Bob, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I like the guy who just called about memories.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it?
That's what I look at every time I walk in my garage every day. I have a full side of my garage covered with nameplates, nameplates, from electrical equipment that I worked on for 50 years.
No kidding.
Like, I'm just giving you some examples.
Yeah.
Westinghouse, General Electric, like GE. You know, in Guelph, they closed the General Electric factory a little while ago, okay? And they modernized their substation out in the back field, okay? And I asked the guy, the maintenance guy I worked for, I did substation testing and repairs and things, but I asked him, could I have those nameplates that are on those breakers and transformers outside that they're going to get rid of and demolish? And these nameplates are like 20 inches wide, cast steel, about an inch thick, with the logo GE on them, and he gave me every one of them. I couldn't believe it. They weigh about 30 pounds apiece.
Wow.
And I said, well, they're a little faded and weathered from being outside, screwed to the side of the transformers.
Sure. Yeah.
Switchgear. But I said, well, they look better if the background is black and the GE symbol on them is a shiny symbol, GE. And I refurbished some of them, and man, they just look like mint condition now. But I have others that are just like 30, 40 years old that I collected. I always ask the customers, I wouldn't just take them off the device I'm working on.
Of course. And there you go. And you end up with that big collection down the road. That's pretty cool. And now you can go into your garage and see it every day. Ernie, what do you collect?
So, quick story about that card. I got a really neat story about that. So, when my public school principal and I became really good friends, and throughout high school, when co-op came on, I decided to do my co-op. He was a huge collector of cards and sports memorabilia. So what I did, I sold a lot of his stuff as my co-op on eBay when that was kind of a thing, when it kind of started way back in the day when I was in grade 12. And not only did I get to spend a lot of time with one of my really good friends, and he was retired at that point too, so I got to do that. But that particular card, he, as a grade 3 student, I think it was grade 3, there was this thing called campage, where you would just campage a card to a piece of wood, shellac it on there. And it was always the laugh in his office, because he's like, Ernie, that card is probably worth about a good at least 20 grand back then. And he goes, look at it. Look what I did to it as a grade 3 or grade 5 student. And so we'd always see that and laugh. I'm blessed I was able to do the eulogy at his funeral. It's one of the stories I shared, and that card was just one of those things about my Mr. Thick, who I miss. And got me into the hobby. I've done a lot of it myself through card sports memorabilia here and there. And, just wanted to add a little story to that card, and just really something sentimental to me as one of my really close friends.
I love it, Ernie. Great story. It's like when we put cards in the spokes of our bicycles, right? You imagine how much money we lost. Desi, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Excellent, thanks. What do you collect?
I collect all things Beatles.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I have original bobbing head Beetle dolls, and about 20 years ago they were on Oprah, and at that point they were worth about $6,500 US. So I have no idea what they're worth now, but anything Beatles. I have original albums, pins, you name it.
So good.
I love the Beatles.
I love it, Desi. Thanks for the call. I almost got hit by a bus crossing Abbey Road, but I'm still here to tell the story. It's the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Oh, I ran late. Sorry, Desi, that we had to cut short more Beatles stories, but I love that you're collecting Beatles stuff. Got to get you to the 570 News Center for an update, and then open lines. Your 12 o'clock Talkback Hour begins. Your calls, our answers on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage outside, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Each and every day from noon until 1, we open our phone lines to give you the opportunity to sound off, get on the radio, get something off your chest and onto the air. And if it's important to you, it's important to us. So many times we learn things here on the 12 o'clock Talkback Hour. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. If you try one line and it's busy, pro tip, try one of the other ones. Oftentimes you will get through. But those are the ways to reach us on the show. 519-570-2545, star 570, and 1-800-570-5715. See how we worked 570 into each and every one of the numbers for you? Of course, among the things we can discuss today, another local councillor who has decided to throw their hat into an upper-level political ring. Rob Deutschmann resigning his position as a regional councillor to run for the Liberals in the provincial election in Cambridge. His colleague on regional council, Colleen James, also running for the Liberals. She in Kitchener Centre, although she's taking a leave of absence as opposed to resigning. And Carla Johnson, who is currently sitting on the public school board, is running for the Greens in Cambridge. I believe Ms. Johnson is also taking a leave of absence. And I don't think they're done yet. We're going to have a federal election this year, too. Anyway, those three already seeking higher office, and I'm not sure what that means to the votes that were cast for them locally and what it means to those voters. But I would like those voters to get the opportunity to decide how they feel about it. So if you are unsuccessful in winning the provincial seat and you have not resigned your position, it should be resigned. Let the voters then decide if they want to put you back into it. That's one thing we can talk about a little bit more. And how about this, just for the record? Amazon closing down all of its distribution centers in Quebec. 1,700 jobs will be lost. I guess they're going to go back to a third-party model. And the reason, by all accounts, is that they were getting closer in Quebec with those Amazon distribution centers to unionizing. So let this be a warning to anyone who works at the center in Cambridge. Don't get too close to the idea of unionizing your workplace, because they might just do the same. Can you imagine, with everything that we went through to get that Amazon facility built and all of the pushback against it, if it ends up being closed because the employees there attempt to unionize? But what I struggle with in all of this is we are talking about one of the world's largest companies and one of the world's wealthiest people behind it. And heaven forbid that the employees making that company so big want to unionize. Heaven forbid they have some union and other employment protections. I mean, all of the billions in your net worth, heaven forbid, you have maybe one, I don't know how many less $1 billion you'd have if all of your employees got paid more or were somehow unionized. But my goodness gracious, if you want to talk about the income inequality or the wealth gap, that pretty much says it right there. Thank you very much to all of the little minions that have made me one of the wealthiest people on the planet. Don't you dare ask for a nickel more. I will tell you what you're worth, and you're going to like it. I guess once the union movement began, they couldn't agree on anything in terms of what the new work environment would look like. So Amazon is just shutting them down. All 7 of them, and now 1,700 people are out of work. And isn't that the way we always talk about it, right? When we talk about organized labor and strikes that are happening, well, they should just be happy to have a job. And certainly in this economy, I can understand that sentiment. It's not easy by many accounts to find work these days. So if you've got it, you probably want to hang on to it. And I don't know how far these conversations got, how many people supported signed up to become a part of the union, if it was, 51%, 91%, whatever the case may have been. But just imagine going from the job that you had, whether you liked the wage or not, to not having a job at all because you got shut right down while you made an attempt to unionize. I think that's a tough one. That is a real tough one to me. And I was talking to a buddy about this the other day, and I don't want to get too apocalyptic. Maybe I've seen too many movies, but if this keeps up, if this wealth gap continues to grow and we see the ultra mega rich continuing to get mega richer while the rest of us can't even unionize our workplaces to try to get a better standard of living, you can only imagine that some sort of revolution would happen, right? I'm not saying next week. I'm not saying next year. I'm not even saying this century. But if it keeps going in this direction, surely at some point, the little minions are going to respond, aren't they? Just something that's on my mind as we embark on our 12 o'clock Talkback Hour today on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio. If you want to talk back or talk at 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. Kyle, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, the Amazon thing is very interesting. I think I don't really care for Amazon. I've never ordered from Amazon. I never will. I have no sympathy for these big corporations. 80% or 90% of businesses in Canada are run by small businesses anyway. But it just shows you, this is the reason why I never will order from Amazon. It's consumers that are fueling this. I mean, people are ordering all the time off Amazon and fueling the fire and giving this guy more and more and more money. And then you go and you look like something like this that happens in Quebec. I mean, you look at all the other law, like whether it's Loblaws or whatever, all of those companies are already using third-party logistics anyway to get their stuff from point A to point B. So for this to happen, it's not really a shock. It's just, I don't know. I feel for the workers at the end of the day. They're the ones that are fighting to make a living and stuff. But I don't know. It's for Amazon. I could really care less on that point of view. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate the call. I get it. And this is the thing, isn't it? Like the world is moving more and more, has moved more and more in that direction. We've talked about this an awful lot on the show. It was almost like, a generation or two, probably 2 generations ago, that when you got a job, you were taken care of almost from cradle to grave. Not that you started from the cradle, but you get what I mean. You start at the company and then you work there and you retire there and you get a pension from there. Jeff Bezos has a net worth of almost $244 billion. That's just the man. $244 billion. Heaven forbid that he only had a net worth of $5 billion. Like, can you imagine that? Like, the numbers are incomprehensible. And yet, even though Amazon insists it's not about the union. We know it's about the union. And I find it galling, if I'm being honest. And to Kyle's point, though, on it happening to Amazon and, it's driven by consumers, he's absolutely right. And yes, small to medium-sized businesses are the backbone of our economy. There's no question about it. But just to put it in perspective, I don't even understand this concept. Well, I mean, I guess I do understand it, but it's not even on my radar. We had a light go out on the range hood of our stove the other day. And 2 days later, it was bright and lit again. And I saw the box and I said to my beloved, "Oh, where'd you go to get them?" She says, "Amazon." Because you go on, you click, and it's at your door the next day. It's a fascinating business model, but it never even occurred to me to go online to order something. I'm going to go to Home Hardware and get what I need. But that's just me. And so many others are clearly not me. It'll show up on your porch. Imran, good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. Good afternoon. And thanks for taking my call. It's me again. If you remember, yesterday I was talking about the vision of the Canadian leaders.
Yes.
And you made a clarification why, or made a comments why we don't have a vision. It's mostly our political system is 4 years and they have short-sighted views.
That's right, because they're just trying to get reelected again. Their job is to stay in power. Yeah.
Yeah, it was making sense to me at that time, but when I thought more about it last night, I was trying to, I was kind of disagreeing on what you have said. Maybe I'm wrong, but let me tell my comments. I don't know about your personal life, but if you are a dad, for example, right, you are always firefighting with your family. You're meeting the ends meet, right? But at the end of the day, you have a long-term vision, right? Where do you want to take your family? How do you want to see your kids in 10, 15 years' time, right? So it's same goes to the political leaders. They are our leaders. They will always have firefighting. There may be parties structure is like that. They are elected for 4 years or 8 years, but it doesn't mean that they should not have a long-term vision. Their long-term vision or ambition will actually help them to formulate this short-term activities that will be linked with the long-term vision. So I think that's where our leaders are lacking significantly. They don't, or maybe we don't know if they have a long-term vision because they don't portray that side that much in an election. So to me, I would recommend that the leaders will focus that side more when the election come, at least in their platform, and let the Canadian know what they're thinking and where they want to go. I know we are mocking with Donald Trump's comments. Give me one more minute, Mike. We're making funny comments like Donald Trump wants to go to Mars. Donald Trump wants to do this and that. But at the end of the day, if you look at, you need some guts to say, I want to go to the Mars and put the flag there, right? I don't think any Canadian leaders will have that kind of guts and say that I want to go to, say, for example, I want to send a satellite to the sun and see what's going on there, right? You need a guts and ambitions. I'm not saying that that's the right ambition, but I'm saying that shows the courage and boldness of a leader, right? So we need something from our leaders. If you look at the other, what is going on in the healthcare, education, the housing, for the last 15 years, did you see any improvement? I didn't see any improvement significantly. Healthcare deteriorated. Education system is I don't know where it is going. He's studying in the portables in a humid condition. Sometimes the air conditioner is not working. Healthcare, you sit there forever to see a doctor. We need a real ambition and a real leader. We're not only just going to the parliament and fighting with each other. That's all.
All right, Imran. Thanks very much. I get it. I love your vision. I really do. If you don't reach for the stars, you're not even going to grab a handful of clouds. It's your 12 o'clock Talkback Hour on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. The Talkback Hour means the more of your opinions we can hear, the better. So let's get right back to the phones. Ernie, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike, just for the record, I do not want you to fall on the ice, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I don't want to fall on the ice either, but I will use caution while I'm out there.
But if you do by chance, I hope it's on a doorbell camera.
Settle down.
Anyways, just back to Stellantis, talking about Amazon there. Stellantis just laid off 1,500 Canadian workers yesterday, and they're all moving those jobs to the USA. And we just invested $30 billion for a battery plant in Windsor. But that's Dodge for the listeners that don't know who that is. And we're playing games with this government here, saying dollar for dollar. We got Doug Ford trying to be like he's playing prime minister right now, the way I see it. And we're going to lose. We are going to lose this. How many more jobs are we going to lose because of this? That's why I keep repeating that. I sound like a broken record, that I want this election to happen. So we have some leadership that can take serious and not all these dress up games. And we have our premiers defending Canada all of a sudden.
Well, I hear you and the interest in an election, Ernie, sooner rather than later. But I don't know, if the subsidies have already been provided, you want them clawed back? And do you think Pierre Poilievre is going to do that?
Well, see, I understand we've already spent the money. And wasn't that the plan, too, where it wasn't even Canadian workers building that plant or something like that?
Well, and that was one of the problems initially, too, or one of the concerns, because workers were brought in from elsewhere to start work on that plant in Windsor.
I'm just saying we're already starting to see some of the signs. I don't believe that they just laid those workers off and sent them to the U.S. because, it wasn't just their update meeting yesterday. I firmly believe it had to deal with their new leader in the USA and where they're probably better off building that car.
Yeah, Ernie, I get it. But here's the thing. This is the challenge then, right? So they're better off building that car in the USA because the USA is going to make it more attractive. And look, as individuals, we're always looking for our best deal too. But this is the game that starts getting played, right? We've got these subsidies over here to attract you to build and employ our workers, but then this place over there offers more. Tim says the same thing via email to Mike at 570news.com regarding Amazon's decision to close those 7 centers in Quebec, saying it's not about the union, but I think we all know it's about the drive to unionize, and the provincial government saying there's nothing it can do about it. And Tim's email to Mike at 570news.com says they were subsidized, given tax breaks to establish those facilities. Those breaks should be clawed back. I don't know that there's even a mechanism for that, but I certainly understand the sentiment, right? We're like, please, Amazon, come over here. We're going to give you these breaks to help you establish a facility that will employ thousands of our community members. That's awesome. Oh, now you're going to pull out because you don't like the drive to unionize? What about those thousands of community members? Tough spot. Greg, Dave, I see you, and there's a line open for you if you want to be on the Talkback Hour. We continue on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Let's get right back to the phones on this busy Talkback Hour today. Greg, good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. Since you tabled, the concept of unions, 3 quick comments and 1 question. I've seen the good about unions. The last part-time job I had, when minimum wage was $6.50, $8.95 starting wage. Perfect. I've seen the bad. Burns Meats, June of '84, closed. It was already unionized, but morons in charge of the union there convinced everybody that, $11.90 an hour to start back then wasn't good enough. So that's the good and the bad. And the last company I worked for before now, I was fresh new, and they didn't really level with me. They kind of fooled me into trying to go get a union rep to talk about whatever. There was a vote, but we heard that, if the company ahead of time said, if you guys union, we're closing. We'll sell our land. We'll just whatever. They already had a plan. So it's not the first time I've heard that. I almost wonder why more companies don't do that. But now my question is, before anybody chooses to go try to do the union push, do they ever try union mentality without the union? Hey, company management, let's sit down and almost bargain unofficially for some of these things before actually saying, okay, we got to now go the union way before anything's going to happen. Is that a common thing out there, do you think?
That's a great question, Greg. I don't know that it would be, because it takes an awful lot of effort on the individual's part when that's what the union has the expertise in. But I would suspect, here and there at times, sure, that would be the case. And the idea here too, let's not forget, I think Toyota is an excellent example locally, not unionized, but is paying a wage and has created a working conditions that are on par with unionized automakers. Because the idea here is that a rising tide should raise all boats, right? If you'll forgive the cliche. But that's sort of the principle behind it all. And I'm with Greg too. Like I've heard the good, I've heard the bad. And I guess that kind of goes with everything, doesn't it? You take the good with the bad. Lisa, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, too.
Good.
Interesting conversation about the incentives and the tax breaks to companies like Stellantis to come here.
Yep.
I'm wondering, would those contracts not have been based on the company staying within Canada for a certain period of time? Like if they didn't specify these tax breaks are based on you staying for, I don't know, minimum 10 years, because why the hell else would you spend all that money building a plant if you weren't planning on staying? It just doesn't make sense to me. And if that's what happened with our government, then I just don't know what to say. That just seems unrealistic and just really bad business behavior. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate the 2 cents. I hadn't thought of it that way. But yeah, there should be conditions on the billions, right? Because there are that billions. And toll-free Jay, if you're listening while you're on the phone, leave Devin alone. He's got other people that he needs to get on the line. Toll-free Jay is just dominating poor Devin. Toll-free Jay, get on the line, and then you can come on the air, okay? Dave is next on the Talkback Hour, though. Good afternoon, Dave.
Good afternoon, Mike. I want to just briefly comment on your issue of holding elections for office when a person leaves that office.
Yes, sir.
Like to run in the provincial election. My brief comment is my hope is that the provincial government passes a law and says if you leave your position, like in city council or whatever, and run for an office, there will not be an election until a general election is, and that you must bring the next person in line that was in line in the last election that came second.
Okay,
hold on, and have them hold the position until the next election. And the reason why I say all that is purely because of the cost and the lack of people who vote. Like I live in the city of Cambridge, and a number of years ago, Cambridge was the first in our region to turn around and bring in telephone calling for elections or to vote. And the percentage of people who voted in that election went down. And we were the least number who voted in that election compared to the other cities in the region. And that opened my eyes to that whole issue of elections.
I just want to understand, Dave, and I'm sorry, that's why I interrupted you before. I apologize for that. But at the beginning, you said, and I just want to understand the law that you want passed provincially is that if somebody leaves their seat at city council, then the next person gets appointed, the runner-up gets appointed until we can have another general election. Is that the idea?
That's the idea.
Gotcha. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the thought you've put into this. And I get it. And I had this conversation, and I admit, I'm really passionate about this because I love the opportunity that we get to vote in all of our elections, but I feel as though there is a growing disconnect between those who are elected and those who have elected them. And those who get elected start to think a certain way, and they don't really see it our way anymore, if you will, as voters. I had the same conversation with a longtime local politician who I respect immensely, retired now, but along the lines of what Dave was just talking about, the expense of by-elections, the turnout, and why it would be almost prohibitively expensive if you consider the turnout. But I challenged back, and this is where I really start to get frustrated, because I'm like, well, why do you think there's decreasing turnout? Right? I really believe that one of the reasons that fewer and fewer people are voting is because they don't believe their vote matters. They don't believe their vote is cared for, is taken seriously by the people who receive it. And I'm not trying to speak ill of those who have run for office, those who are in office. I'm not trying to speak for the motivations of all, but I'm just telling you as a voter, that's the sense I get. And I'm honestly, and I said this in the conversation with that longtime politician the other day, I have voted in every election, municipal, provincial, federal, since I turned 18. And I am this close. I am this damn close. And my thumb and forefinger are not that far apart from not voting in the next one. Because I'm exhausted by this. I really am. We've got a premier provincially that's calling an early election because it's politically opportunistic to do so. We've got municipal councillors or trustees that are leaving not even just over halfway through their first term. Like 2 years ago, they said, believe in me. I'm going to do this for you. I believed in them. I voted for you. And now you're going to leave me because you want to go to another seat. And I don't know. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated. And federally, we had some Yahoo tell us that 2015 was going to be the first election contested under first past the post. And where are we today? Same damn thing. I am really frustrated. I don't think you, and I'm talking to you who's elected, I don't think you care about my vote. I don't think you care about me. And that frustrates me. I'm doing my part. I'm paying my taxes. I'm voting in your elections. Show me that you have some respect for my ballot. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 12 o'clock Talkback Hour, 570 News Radio. Sorry, I got a little heated or animated or passionate there. I just believe so passionately in our democracy, in our opportunities to exercise that democracy. And I think maybe, just maybe, along the way, we've lost the idea of what public service is all about, as opposed to public opportunity. But I'll leave it there. I did my part before, and I want to get back to hearing your part. Steve, good afternoon.
No apology needed, Mike. Your sincerity in that matter, it's what people need to actually really ponder themselves, and that anybody, and this is my whole call, anybody who's leaving any job to take another job, you have to ask what their motivation is, and almost like I'd say probably 99% of the time, it's self-interest. And I can't see myself, regardless of any political affiliation, what have you, of voting for somebody or giving my support to somebody who gives up one thing while forsaking other people that put him in that job. Like, it's akin to a guy or let's just say a spouse leaving another spouse because something better comes along, and that's the way I look at it. It's you have made a promise to the people who elected you that you are going to be there for that job. You're going to do that job. And then the first thing you do when something better comes along is drop everything and leave. Sorry, you would never get my support. And if anything, it just highlights, what kind of people they are. And they should never be in public office.
All right, Steve, I appreciate the call. And I do. I understand that sentiment. I really do. And for those folks, like half of the regional councillors elected for Kitchener on our regional council, because there are 4, are gone. So the other 2 are doing twice the work. Kind of sucks to be you, Michael Harris. And, oh my goodness, why am I forgetting who? Rob Deutschman, Colleen James, Michael Harris. Somebody's going to be mad at me, aren't they? Anyway, you're doing twice the work. You're doing twice the work, or half the people are being unrepresented. Where'd my microphone go? Did somebody turn my microphone off, or is that just my headphones? Oh, there it is. I think it's the headphones. I got to get this wire reconnected. All right, let's get back to the phones. Grant, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. And, yeah, you're not wrong. I think the last time I voted, it was... I spoiled my vote because when I was working, I went to Mr. Milroy and I mentioned to them that they're thinking of contracting out. And his opinion was both hospitals are talking. Well, I'm asking for some help here. If we hadn't merged with KW and been sent over to KW, I would have still had my job. And it does annoy me that these individuals don't want to listen to you. And I did not know that about the city council, where you said a handful of them have left. Well, I think there should be something in writing that you stay put. Like you said, we voted them in.
That's the thing, Grant, and I agree with you on that point. And the funny thing about it is, if you are provincial or federal and you want to leave to run for a different level of office, even if you want to be a mayor of a city, or you want to go from provincial to federal, you have to resign your seat. I don't know why we don't have that mechanism locally. It's Kerry Williams, who's the other Kitchener councillor on regional council. I can't believe I've gapped on that. Christine, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. You already know I'm 100% in agreement with you on this conversation. It disappoints me that this is happening so much in in municipal council at the city levels. I think it's a disservice to the constituents that vote us in. And I think that it should be much the same as federal and provincial. If you want to run, you make a commitment to run, then you step down, you let the next person take in. I mean, think about the people that have ran an election and came in second. And someone else jumped ship for a few months to see if they can take a shot at provincial or federal, and then they don't win and they come back in. It's not fair. And it's not fair to the constituents either.
I think you're absolutely right. And the other worry that I have in all of this, Christine, is the great work that really can be done locally. Like you can, and I feel like that's being a little bit overlooked in all of this, that you can't get anything done at the local level. Well, sure you can.
Oh, absolutely we can. Just look at the city of Kitchener. I mean, we're a rocket as far as getting things done in this region. I'm a little biased maybe, but I think I'm speaking the truth here. And you're right. When someone from another ward, decides to leave and absolve their responsibilities to run an election or try to do both, it's not fair. It's not fair to it's not fair to the councillors, but more importantly, it's not fair to the people that voted them in. And I think you said this. It has taken so long to get people to come to the polls. Like I remember there was a time when the numbers were down so low. And that's going to happen again. People are going to get disillusioned. They are getting disillusioned by this.
Yeah,
it's wrong.
I hate to say it because I am too. And Christine, I appreciate that.
That concerns me, yes.
Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Mike, and work you do as well.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Christine Michaud, Ward 4, currently elected councillor, feels similarly to Steve and I and Grant, and it's interesting. I'm not sure, though, it's getting through to the council chambers. I get the sense that they view it differently, and there's a disconnect, right? We don't want that disconnect. We have to find the connection here. It's the Mike Farwell Show, 12 o'clock Talkback Hour, 570 News Radio. And before we hand things over to Rob Snow with Now You Know, let's continue our Talkback Hour. John, good afternoon.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Yeah, I agree with you that voter apathy is a problem. And I saw a video by Adam Conover who spoke about why he thought the Democrats lost down south. And he attributed it to the loss of for places where people aren't meeting up anymore, where unions and political parties used to have these beer halls and stuff, where they just got together, drank, ate, danced, and talked about politics. And they would have someone local from the, who's either running for office or in office there to hear the concerns and enact those policies. And these days, people are just sort of just shopping for politicians and not really being, a community with the politician, if you know what I mean.
I think I do know what you mean, John, and I like the way you put it. I appreciate the call. Shopping for politicians. And we spend so much time in the online world. And don't forget, while we're doing that, even if we're not aware of it, the algorithm will continue to funnel the same stuff to it. And suddenly we're in an echo chamber. And that goes for the elected and the voters. I love where John is coming from here. How about some town halls? How about some, gather at the pub and let me hear your concerns? Because you see, I am a member of your community and I want to be your voice in the community. There's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. And I hope we can reconnect in the next little bit. For us today, we'll have to say farewell and let's reconnect tomorrow morning at 9. Okay. Now you know with Rob Snow is coming up until 3. Devin Robertson is our guy on the other side of the glass. My name is Mike Farwell. Bye for now.